Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. Well, it finally happened to me. I'm not certain this is more of an entitled, selfish, or just a run-of-the-mill Karen story, but here goes. A few weeks ago, I, 39 was on a work trip and went to a restaurant to get a meal at a casual-type local place. Since I had a few hours to kill, I decided to dine, in rather than get takeout. It was early afternoon, and the place was around 60 full. The hostess seated me at a two-top. Before I even sat down, I asked her for directions to the restroom so I could wash my hands before eating. I left my ball cap hat on top of the menu on the table, mainly so any server would know someone was seated. After the 2 minutes it took me go wash my hands, I returned and found my table and one of the two chairs gone, my hat and the menu included. I turned around to look for a server when I noticed that a nearby booth had a two-top table with one chair pulled up to it. There were 5 people seated and only one at the two-top. On the floor a few feet away, I noticed my hat. When I approached to pick up my hat, I asked the people sitting there if they'd moved the table. A woman in the booth, let's go ahead and call her Karen, responded that a friend showed up so they needed a larger or additional table and that this one wasn't being used. I responded that I'd been seated there and was using it, and had left my hat on the table to indicate that while I washed my hands. She responded that there was no hat on the table. When I asked how my hat ended up on the floor, picking it up and pointing to it next to her table, she said she never saw it. At that point I noticed a waiter, so I gestured for him to come over. I explained that this party moved my table over to their booth. I said I had no problem if they wanted to use one of the chairs for their additional guest, but that I would need the table. Karen cut me off at the end and said, to me, not the waiter, that I should just find another table since they were already using it. I responded to the waiter that I was using it, which was why I'd left my hat there while I washed my hands. At this point, the other woman who was sitting at my table started to get to, presumably to give me the table back. But Karen immediately said, "Don't you dare" to her, then stared at me and the waiter as if daring neither of us to respond. The waiter started to say he was sure they could find her another table. She cut him off with a typical Karen response. "We are not giving up the table, and I need to speak to your manager." This is when I decided I really liked the waiter and would give him a nice tip. He responded that he wasn't going to waste his manager's time on a complaining Karen and told her the options were to give me back the table to go eat somewhere else. I'm not sure how, but it worked, except for the staring daggers and muttered comments which I found amusing. She did not appreciate my periodic smirk or chuckle in response. Looking back, I maybe could have just moved, but I also assumed it was an innocent mistake until Karen opened her mouth and hit me with that patented attitude. If you watch television shows from the 70s and 80s, you will notice odd things. People smoking at work, on planes, even in hospitals. Telephones have cords. At a police station, there are no computers on the desks, and everyone is smoking. Things have changed a lot since then. That includes mental health standards and police procedures. Please keep that in mind. Caller ID had not been invented. There were no mass-market mobile phones, and the ones that existed were for the filthy rich and had limited use due to technology. It typically took a week to get your photos back, and there were no selfies. Wearing a seatbelt was optional, as were child safety seats. Car windows had to be manually rolled down. It was a different world. These events happened a long time ago. I'm renaming Entitled Ant to K for Crazy Ant, as per the request of so many who were getting confused by EA. If you don't want to read the original story, my crazy aunt steals the car belonging to her daughter and gets arrested for that and destroying her driver's license. Aunt posted a $500 U.S. bond and had to appear in court the following week for the first hearing, as her attorney was going to attempt to get it dismissed. Just to clarify, the attorney in question spoke only to my aunt and had only her version of the events. In spite of what you may see on television, that's generally how it works. Most attorneys don't investigate matters themselves and go off of what their client says in any official documentation provided by the opposition. In this case, the state. Anyway, this is what happened starting the day after that arrest and leading up to that hearing. To say that hell broke loose the next day is putting it mildly. Even though my cousin Emily had a ticket written by the officer from the night before stating that she had a valid license and to call it in if necessary, we opted to have me drive to the license branch to get a replacement. It only took a few minutes and we were on our way to the museum. We were both a little nervous because my aunt hadn't called or anything, and with her silence was something to be worried about. We left the museum to get some lunch, and my cousin went to the restroom while I waited at the kiosk. As I'm standing there, a police officer approaches me. There are 3 others milling about, looking very out of place in that area. You know, the fake I'm supposed to be here need to look fake busy behavior. The officer asked me for identification, and as I go to pull my license out for him, I asked him what was going on and why he needed to see it. Me, sure, officer, let me get it. What's going on? T.O., I have a report that you are an endangered runaway involved in the trafficking of narcotics. I stopped cold and stared at the officer. He was not kidding. I started laughing. He was non-amused. My cousin approached us. Me, I don't suppose the name of the person who gave you the tip is Crazy Aunt? T.O., I can't give that information out. Me, hands in my license. As you can see, I'm over the age of being considered a runaway. I was 21. I'm also not involved with narcotics of any kind, and if you need to discuss this further, you can contact my attorney, and please tell my crazy aunt I said to drop dead. T.O., I'm sorry for bothering you, but we had to check. Me, I get that. Maybe I was an endangered runaway, and until you check, you can't possibly know that. What you should know, however, is that your source was arrested last night for stealing a car and destroying government property. T.O., well, I'll check on that when I get back. Maybe we need to add another charge to her list. Have a nice day? Cousin and I get our food and head back to her place. When we arrive, there are about 30 messages on her answering machine. For you young people, it was a primitive form of voicemail. Several were from my brother. It seems that my aunt, delusional as ever, called him and told him I'd been arrested for drug trafficking and was in really serious trouble. He was a little concerned. I called him back and told him everything. Thankfully, he hadn't booked a flight to get to me, so could fail on that front. I told him our plans for the evening, and he told me to be very cautious around my aunt. I told him not to worry, I'd be fine. The other messages were from Crazy Aunt to me, demanding that I leave, explaining that I'm not allowed by law to visit that state without her permission or without being with a parent or legal guardian. The world was a strange place in her head, and she was going to have me arrested if I didn't leave. Naturally, she blamed me for her arrest the previous evening. Emily and I went out for dinner and to attend the Concerts in the Park series that was going on that week, and I had the feeling I was being followed. I was trying to pinpoint where my crazy aunt was in the crowd when Emily said softly, straight ahead, 3 o'clock. Yep, there she was. Unlike everyone else who was facing the band, she was staring at us. Just staring. We decided to cut the evening short and went home. I like weird, but that was sinister. About an hour later, there was a banging on the door. It was the police, again. We let them in. They had a tip that it was a drug house and asked if we minded them searching it. Of course, we minded. We asked if they had a warrant, and suddenly my crazy aunt appears. T.O., ma'am, you can't be here right now. K, my daughter lives here. T.O., I'm sorry, ma'am, you still will have to wait outside. Me, so you gave them another false tip? Ka, no, I told you that you would be arrested, and I was right. If you aren't hiding drugs, then why do you care if there is a warrant? Answer me that. Me, because privacy is important to us as citizens in a free country. T.O., ma'am, no one is being arrested. We were following up on a tip, and apparently you are the one that made the accusation. K, arrest her. She isn't supposed to be here. T.O., why not? Ka, because she doesn't have my permission to be here. I've told her specifically that she is not allowed to visit my daughter without my permission. T.O., do you own this property? Ka, no. My daughter lives here, so it's my home too. Emily, no, it's not your home. I invited Acre here, now please leave us alone. K, she doesn't have my permission to even be in this state. T.O., your permission is not required to visit this state, or even this person. They are both adults. Me, officers, this woman has now made 2 false complaints against me, harassed me, and threatened me. Is there any chance you can arrest her, lose her paperwork for about 10 days? By then, I'll be home. K, they can't do that. I have every right to keep you away. Besides, I have to be in court next week because of you. T.O. Why does she have to be in court? Emily. Because she stole my car and torn up my license yesterday. T.O. That was her. I heard about that at the station this morning. Me. What are my options? T.O. I'm sorry, but we can't lose her paperwork, though I certainly sympathize with you. You can, however, press charges against her if you like. It would get her out of your hair until morning at least. Me. I'll take it. I signed the form and she was arrested again. This time she posted $1,000 and was released. Because the police clearly don't understand the law and how she is right, she goes back to trying to harass me and control Emily. The problem was that now she couldn't find us. While she was busy being arrested and bonding out, I talked to my mom and her brother and sister-in-law. Mom got us a hotel suite booked under the maiden name of my good aunt. Emily and I packed up and moved to hotel. 4 days later, there is a knock on the hotel room door. I answer it to find police standing there. This was different. 2 were in uniform and 2 were in regular clothes, detectives. Oh boy. I sighed, told them I'm not a runaway and there are no drugs, but come on in anyway, and offered them some of our soda supply. They declined. Detective, do you know why we are here? Me. Not specifically, but if I were to guess, I'd say my crazy aunt has cooked up some news story to sell to you. Detective, do you know where we can find Emily? Me. Yes. Detective, is this a confession? Me. To what? Detective, to her murder. Me. What? Detective, your aunt says that you have always hated your cousin and that 4 days ago you got her out of the way and then killed Emily and dumped her body. We would like to know where her remains are to give her family closure. Cooperation would go a long way here. Me. First crazy aunt is the one that has always hated me. It's a long story. Emily is one of my best friends as well as my cousin. Second, I not only didn't kill her, she isn't dead. Detective. Then where is she? Me. Taking a shower. We just got back from the pool and chlorine does nasty things to her curls. She'll be out in a minute. Sure, you don't want a soda while we wait. One officer had moved to the bathroom door and could hear someone in there. He nodded at the detective. T.O., do you have any weapons in here? Me. Just the knife by the sink. I handed them each a Coke and took one myself. I yelled into the bathroom. Hurry up, we have company. Emily squealed Mikey. I knew she'd hurry up now. I returned to my seat. There was another knock on the door. This time, it was Mike. He came in, grabbed a soda, sat down, and looked at the police. He nods to the 2 plainclothes cops and says, Detectives. They nodded. Mike, so what is she claiming you did this time? Me. Murder. Mike, cool. Who'd you kill? Me. Emily. Mike, damn, I was going to marry that girl. Me, you do and Kay becomes your mother-in-law. Mike, I don't plan on returning from the honeymoon. She'll never find us. Me, I thought that when we left Ian's place and decided to stay here. Yet, here we are. Mike, fair point. How did they find you? Me, good question. Detective, we had your information and we called your home. Your father initially refused to tell us where you were and insisted on calling the precinct directly to make sure it was really the police. Smart man. Then he told us where you were. He would like you to call him when we are done here. I picked up the phone and called my brother. I let him know everything was fine and that I'd call back later with more details. Emily comes out of the bathroom and rushes to see Mike. It takes a second for her to notice the police. Emily, oh, good grief. What is she claiming you did this time? Me, murder. Emily, wow, she's pulling out all the stops here. Who'd she say you killed, Kennedy? Me, you? Emily, me. But I'm not dead. Detective, may we see some identification? Emily handed it to him and we gave him the whole story. The officers just shook their heads. Detective, we will let her know that you are alive and that you will contact her when you see fit. We will not disclose your location to her. Me, so she gets away with more harassment? Detective, I'm afraid so. The reality is that we can't prove that there was malicious intent here, even though there was. When neither she or anyone else that knows Emily had seen or heard from her in days, she can make the case that she reasonably concluded that Emily was in danger. You were the last person known to be with her, so you are the logical starting point. Me. Well, thanks for not coming in with guns blazing. Detective. We only do that on television. Randomly shooting up hotel rooms creates lots of paperwork, and we hate paperwork. Try and enjoy the rest of your visit here. Me. Oh, I will. She goes to court in a few days for car theft, and I wouldn't miss that for anything. It was a couple weeks before Christmas, and in the back of the store, every department manager stood hoping they would not draw the short straw. The boss had wanted to do some big displays for our store, which meant one of us had to go down to the nearest crafts and homewares place to pick up the balloons he'd ordered and a few other things. We were drawing straws because no one likes running errands to this place. It's basically walking into the lion's den of ladies who insist you work there. A large number of the customers are either senior citizens or entitled soccer mums. Their uniform is similar to ours in that we both wear black pants and steel caps. They never have enough staff on, and the queues at the till are long no matter when you go. You cannot walk in there looking even vaguely like you may work in retail, or you're going to get hassled. As you can guess by reading this, I draw the short straw. I took off my uniform shirt, picked up my backpack, put in my headphones hoping that this would protect me somewhat, and walked into the store, which was already shoulder to shoulder. And as usual, they only had a couple of tills open with lines snaking around the store. Great. I breezed through that store avoiding eye contact with everyone, headphone in but off so I can hear what's going on. I'm still having loads of people try to catch my eye and wave me down. By the time I get what I need, I've already had to point to my headphones about 15 times because people are just coming up to me and asking me stuff. I take my place at the end of the massive queue. I've got a big trolley stuff and a huge bunch of helium balloons. There's a group of about 4 older women behind me whining about how long the line is. I notice that one woman is talking louder, raising her voice, saying something like they must open another till, whatever happened to customer service, etc., etc. She's occasionally clearing her throat, and I get the impression she thinks I'm an employee and wants me to overhear. I was not wrong. After a couple more minutes of this and very little movement, there's a tap on my shoulder. Lady, are you going to open Me. I don't work here. I shove my headphones back in. A few more minutes go by and the lady is still whining. Another shoulder tap. Lady, can't you just... Me. No. Headphone back in. I'm hoping my bluntness has gotten through to her. More whinging, more minutes. Another tap. Lady, the line is just very long and we're in, Me. So go get a till on then. I'd really had enough of her nonsense by now. Lady looks like I just told her Wheel of Fortune reruns are canceled. Excuse me. I just want to... Me. Yeah, I'm in a hurry too, so why don't you open a till? Lady. I don't work here. I'm cussed. Me. Neither do I, and I'm a customer too, but apparently that doesn't matter to you. So on you go. Open a till. We're waiting. The look of shock on the face of her and her friends was incredible. We kind of stared at each other for a second or two while she registered that I wasn't kidding around. Then I turned back and they went back to their muttering. I didn't get another shoulder tap after that. I hope she learned a lesson that day. Once upon a time, in the fabled land of New York City, when I was 10 or so years of age, my father and I stood at the counter of a small cafe in a Macy's. My father was placing the order, coffee, I'm sure, black for him and a sweetened one for my mother, and I was leaning with folded arms on the counter's edge, with one foot bouncing by the toe on the floor behind me, a product of my Tourette syndrome. And it should be noted that the store was empty around us, with no other people in line or even within a stone's throw of the cafe. Now, while I stood in calm idleness, amid the bright glow of skylights and lightly colored merchandise displays, several things happened. First, there was the feeling of someone tripping over my bouncing foot, followed by a surprised and angered, hey. Finally, I felt a weak impact of clenched knuckles between my shoulder blades. Unhurt but startled, I turned and saw a woman, perhaps in her late 50s, thin almost to the point of frailty, glaring at me with an anger that quailed my goody-two-shoes heart. I was an oddly well-behaved child growing up, beloved of my teachers, prone to putting myself into timeout for crime unwitnessed, and woefully untoughened in the face of the dark things of life. And so, while today I can see, in the eye of memory, that this woman's anger had all the limp potency of an overcooked stalk of asparagus, at the time, I was still and afraid. The woman spoke, frantic and shrill. "You can't just do that. You can't just stick your leg out like a shot." My father's arm was out and had caught her by the upper arm. All in a flash, her face lost all its anger, along with all the color bequeathed to it by the last vestiges of middle age. Then my father spoke, and he spoke with the voice that all good men know and which they sometimes pick up like a sword. When there is warring to do and wrongs to right, that slow, stern voice in which can be heard distant echoes of the fulgurous tones that assailed Moses atop the high crest of Sinai. "My son," he began, "has Tourette's." I remember nothing more of what he said, but even now I can hear the terrible, nearly song-like cadence of those first 4 words, like the opening notes of a funeral dirge. He spoke for but a moment, and when he released the woman, she fled silently and swiftly away. The whole affair was perhaps 20 seconds, and though I cried in my mother's arms in the aftermath, I would not undo the experience now even if I could. For those few painful seconds and years of reflection since have taught me 2 true things: that there are villains in the world, yes, but there are heroes too. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. All right, here we go. Brace yourself, because this story is a wild ride. My name is Lily, and I'm a 22-year-old college student. I'm just trying to live my life and get my degree without any drama. But of course, life never goes according to plan. It all started one afternoon when I was sitting in a coffee shop, minding my own business and studying for an upcoming exam. That's when I heard a loud commotion coming from the other side of the shop. I glanced up to see a woman, probably in her late 30s, storming in with her 2 kids, a boy and a girl who looked around 8 and 10 years old. I could tell right away that this woman was trouble. The woman walked up to the counter and started demanding that the barista give her a free latte. When the barista refused, the woman started yelling and causing a scene. I rolled my eyes and went back to studying, figuring that the woman would eventually give up and leave. But of course, I was wrong. The woman spotted me and marched over, dragging her 2 kids with her. "Excuse me, miss, do you have a spare charger I can use?" I raised an eyebrow. "No, sorry, I don't." "Well, that's just great," the woman huffed. "My phone is about to die and I need to make an important call." "You know what? Give me your charger." I couldn't believe the nerve of this woman. No, I don't think so." "Excuse me. How dare you refuse me? My kids need to make a call to their father, and you're just sitting here studying. You're obviously not using your phone, so give me your damn charger." I sighed and decided to stand my ground. "I'm sorry, but I don't owe you anything." "You can't just demand things from strangers like that, and why are you so rude?" The woman's response was to huff and puff and stomp away, dragging her kids behind her. But that wasn't the end of it. As I was packing up my stuff to leave, the woman came back over and stood in front of me. "You know what? You're a terrible person. You should be ashamed of yourself for not helping a mother in need." I couldn't believe this lady's nerve. "Excuse me, you're the one who's being entitled and rude." The woman scoffed. "Entitled? How dare you? You're the one who thinks she's better than everyone else. You know what? I'm going to talk to your manager and get you fired." I just shook my head and walked away, not wanting to deal with this crazy lady anymore. But as I was leaving the shop, I could hear the woman screaming and yelling at the poor barista, demanding to speak to the manager. I decided that I needed to do something to help. I called the coffee shop's corporate office and explained the situation to them. They assured me that they would handle it, and I left feeling satisfied that I had done something to make things right. A few days later, I received a call from the coffee shop's manager. She thanked me for calling corporate and explained that the woman had been banned from the shop. Apparently, she had a history of causing trouble at other locations as well. I was relieved that the situation had been resolved, but also frustrated that there are people out there who think they're entitled to everything. I vowed to always stand up for myself and others in the face of entitlement. In the end, the entitled mother got what she deserved, a ban from the coffee shop. But I couldn't help but wonder what kind of person she was to act like that in the first place. It made me grateful for my own upbringing and the values my parents had instilled in me. Growing up, my parents taught me the importance of hard work, kindness, and respect for others. They worked long hours to provide for our family, but always made time for us and taught us to appreciate what we had. They never once acted entitled or demanded things from others. I carried those values with me into my own life, and I hope to pass them on to my own children one day. But for now, I was content with just being a decent human being and standing up for what's right. As I walked away from the coffee shop, I couldn't help but chuckle to myself. The entitled mother had gotten her comeuppance, and I had learned a valuable lesson about standing up for myself and others. It was a small victory, but one that I would always remember. This happened several years ago. I was a photographer for a major theme park and have dealt with my fair share of entitled Karen's brads. But there's only been one time I've had to call security because of a Karen. I was working with a character one afternoon, and one of the families that stopped by to pay a visit was this family of 3 with mom, dad, and a 5-year-old boy that I'll name Malcolm. Malcolm is strapped to a harness attached to mom's waist. Think those jogging harnesses for blind runners, to keep him close to mom and dad. Before the session, Dad pulled the character attendant and me aside and alerted us that Malcolm was a nonverbal, autistic, and camera flashes were overstimulating to him. Now, this was a pretty common request, so I adjusted my settings so I wouldn't have to use the flash and thanked him for alerting me. It's Malcolm's turn, and he was such a sweetheart. He just wanted to show off the book full of pictures of his favorite dinosaurs, and we all got sad when he had to leave. A few hours later, I was in an area we refer to as backstage, where guests aren't allowed, heading to my break. Imagine my surprise when all of a sudden I get body slammed by Malcolm. For the record, I'm almost 6'' and 250 lbs, and he nearly managed to knock me over. He's screaming and crying. Fortunately, my manager, Oscar, was nearby, so I flagged him down and we immediately called security. We get Malcolm to a cool, air-conditioned place as it's 95, and I looked up pictures of dinosaurs on my phone to show Malcolm. Eventually, he calmed down, and he essentially became my little buddy. About 10 minutes later, Malcolm was reunited with tearful mom and dad. It's there we got the full story. Enter Karen. Mom, Dad, and Malcolm were getting ice cream when Karen approached. The conversation went roughly as followed. Karen, why is he harnessed? Mom, oh, he's autistic and he will bolt if he's not harnessed. Karen, no, he's not. Mom, excuse me? Karen, you're just a bad parent. My grandson knows better than to stray from me, and he's about the same age. Mom, I'm sorry, but he's incapable of understanding that. It's safer for everyone he is harnessed. It's at this point that Dad comes back with the ice cream, and Mom turns her attention away to help him. The next thing she knows, the harness goes slack. When she looked up, Malcolm and Karen are gone. It's so packed that day that it's easy to lose track of someone, especially if it's a running child. An important thing to note is that the park has cameras everywhere, so it was easy to get a video of the incident and get a description of the Karen. Security was alerted and Karen tracked down. She was belligerent and tried to slap the security guard who stopped her, stupidly doing it in front of an OC sheriff. So she got a lovely court date for assault as a result. Malcolm and his family were given an extra day added to their tickets as an apology for what happened. But they just had one request. They asked to know where I would be the next day so I could take their pictures. The next day, I gave them a full-on photo shoot. And yes, it was the best day of my entire career. I've actually got 2 stories, one raging Karen and one ignorant Carl that just happened the other day. About me and my wife, important, I'm not that tall or muscular, 5'10", 175, but I do have a deep commanding drawl. I'm also a cabinet maker with 30 years exp and a general jack of all trades, including electrical, second-year apprentice before I decided it was not for me. Wife is 6 years older than me. Not a big woman, but not skinny either. Really friendly and outgoing, and worked retail for many, many years. This story is from my wife's work. She has a lot of retail stories. Circa 2007, so I can't remember exact details, but it's pretty close. So in our area, stores aren't allowed to sell alcohol before 11 a.m. The store owner keeps the beer cooler locked and the liquor section roped off till then. It's Sunday about 9:30, in staggered, drunk, raging Karen and heading towards the beer cooler. My wife is stocking chips. One aisle over from the cooler, the innocent customer is getting a few things and has a basket in hand. Employees wear gray slacks, white polos, and a dark blue vest with the store's name on front and back. The innocent customer has on a dress. Anyways, the drunk, raging Karen gets to the beer cooler and tries to open it. She starts tugging and cursing and yells at the innocent customer, "Hey you, open this up!" The innocent customer looks at her bewildered. Karen gets in the innocent customer's face. "Are you deaf?" I said, "Open it up." By this time, wife has gone to see what's going on and turns the corner just in time to see Karen push the innocent customer and scream at the top of her lungs, "Open the cooler. I swear to God if I have to tell you one more." Wife firmly says, "She doesn't work here." "But I do, and you just assaulted a customer. I think it's best if you leave the store." The store owner had also come back to see what was going on and was getting close to them. Karen looks at the innocent customer, mutters sorry, looks at wife, and says, "Well, then you better open the cooler or else I'll..." The store owner turns the corner and says, "Or else you'll what?" Karen looks at him and shrieks. Wife said her voice went up 2 octaves. "I know the owner and I'll have you all fired. Now open this cooler up now." The store owner calmly looks at her. "You know the store owner?" Karen, "Yes, I do, and you're so fired unless you open this up now." The store owner is slightly ticked off by now. First off, we can't open it till 11 by law. Second, I don't know you, and I am the owner. Corinne, you aren't the owner. Open this cooler now. I ain't leaving the light. The store owner motions to wife. "Call the police." Wife and the innocent customer head to front of store. Wife calls police and checks out the innocent customer. Karen is still carrying on telling the store owner he isn't the owner, screaming about the cooler, kicking the cooler, etc. Minutes later, police arrive, proceed to escort her out of the store and arrest her for DWI, as well as disturbing the peace and a bunch of other charges. 3 days later, Corinne, sober this time, enters the store. The owner greets her halfway down the aisle and tells her to leave. She's no longer welcome there. Karen gets mad and starts arguing and gets the police called on her again. Wife says she never saw her again after that. Story 2, just last week. Place, Menards. Menards employees generally wear khakis, collared shirts, and blue vests with Menards printed on them. My outfit that day consisted of torn jeans, ratty steel toe shoes, and stained gray t-shirt. No way I could be confused with an employee, plus I was pushing a cart. So I'm talking with employee 1 who manages electrical. I'm telling him about my plans for burying the water and power lines for our new house. A customer comes up and asks employee 1 about something, and he leaves me to my business. Cue ignorant Carl. "Hey you, where do you keep the spool wire?" My back was to him, although I glanced back towards him. It didn't register that he was talking to me. Ignorant Carl. "Hey, I'm talking to you." I turned around and saw him 5 feet away, mask around neck, looking at me. "Are you talking to me?" Ignorant Carl scoffs. "Do you see anyone else around?" And slowly, purposefully pronouncing every syllable like you would a 3-year-old. "Where do you keep the spool wire?" I don't work." You don't know. What good are you? Typical Menards employee, dumber than a little kid. It took me a second or two for what he was saying to sink in. I was frozen like a deer in headlights. Did he just call me dumber than a little kid? He then grabbed my arm and started, "Are you stupid or what?" I snapped out of it, wrenched my arm from his grasp, and raised my voice a bit. When I raise my voice, it gets deeper and meaner. Firstly, I don't work here. Second, you need to learn some manners. Thirdly, Menards doesn't sell wire by the spool except special order, and if you touch me again, I'll break your hand. I could see it in his eyes. The way he talked and the way I said it startled him, and at that point, it clicked to him, my dress, my cart, my demeanor, that I wasn't an employee. Oh, sorry, I thought you worked here. At that point, employee 2 walked into the aisle and asked if either of us needed help. Ignorant Carl still being his ignorant self. Finally, maybe someone who actually knows something. Ignorant Carl points at me. "This guy says you don't have spool wire, that I have to special order it. Is that true? And how long will that take?" Employee 2. Well, most wire sold by the spool is special order, but we do have a few types of aluminum wire in stock. Ignorant Carl's eyes lit up like he won the jackpot at bingo. I need a spool of 4-gauge copper. Do you have that? Employee 2 walking over to computer. Let me check. Ignorant Carl looking at me like he'd just beat me in checkers. Special order? Yeah? Employee 2 walking back says, no, we don't have 4-gauge in copper, but we have 2-gauge in aluminum. Ignorant Carl. I don't want 2-gauge, I want 4-gauge. It's thicker and I need thicker. At this point, it dawned on me that this guy was an idiot. Anyone who's dealt with wiring knows that the lower the number, the heavier the wire and the more current it can carry. Me. No, 4-gauge is not thicker than 2-gauge. Shut up, I didn't ask you. You don't know nothing, you don't work here. And poked his finger into my chest. Reflexes kicked in and I grabbed his finger and bent it back and growled, I warned you. Touch me again, I will break it, he screams, and I let go, no broken finger, maybe in a bit of pain though. Employee 1 comes running down the aisle. Ignorant Carl is now screaming bloody murder, as he's going to sue me in the store. Employee 2 gets out his radio and calls for the store manager. I'm seriously mad at this point. I was having a great day till this prick showed up. Employee 1 is talking to me, trying to get me to calm down. Employee 2 is trying to comfort the ignorant Carl. The manager enters the scene and the ignorant Carl starts lying about how I just grabbed his finger for no reason and broke it. Employee 2 says that's not exactly what happened and proceeds to explain to the store manager everything he saw. The manager turns to both of us and says, well, I'm not going to call the police, but I'd like you to both leave the store and not come back. I was absolutely mad at this point, so I decided to get the last word in with ignorant Carl. You, sir, are the one who's dumber than a little kid. I'm a second-year electrical apprentice. The lower the number, the thicker the wire, the more current it can carry. You probably have never wired stuff in your entire life. You just like being an ignorant Carl. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences, opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.